In the crooked maw of the 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗶𝗽𝗺𝗀 festered beneath its own skin, Hugo de 𝗟𝗂𝗀 hunched in a den, his scarred hands deliberate, priest-like, over a rite he had learned far from these dripping stones. It is 1814, or perhaps 1815. Nevertheless, the revolution's blade has dulled, and its mania is a memory Hugo does not mourn. He was once noble, perhaps. He had fled east, to the deserts where mystics muttered and the air shimmered. He came back to Paris, different, a man made by his own hand. Lean, perilous, his face a ledger of duels. Well, some duels. More bar fights, scraps, stupid quarrels. He knew he was a swordsman of chilling grace. He'd been told that by a woman he'd paid to fuck him. Now the den stank of sweat and sour wine. But threading through it was a perfume he knew. Opium, his favourite dark companion. From a pouch at his hip, goatskin worn smooth by Anatolian sand, he lifted a brass box, its surface scratched with the cryptic whorls of some dervish dream. Inside the opium squatted, an ugly black jewel. The den's noise receded as he cut a sliver with a dagger, its blade notched from the bone and cartilage it had hacked. He used no fragile stem, but a pipe of horn, dark and stubby, borrowed from a dead Levantine. A flint sparked under his thumb, and the flame caught, small and fierce. The opium softened like wax, and the smoke unfurled into the damp air. He raised his pipe, its tip touching the scar across his lip. Brandenburg's sabre, that pig Marcel. He breathed it in. The taste is sharp, a bitter bloom. As it seeped into him, the world frayed. Old cuts, the hum of a duel's first feint, the weight of a woman's sigh in the dark, all sunk into a deep, slow current. His head rested against the wall. The stone cold through his matted hair, and his eyes, narrowed beneath a brow gashed thrice over, drifted, half-closed. The opium paints for him, not this festering pit, but a minaret's silhouette against a molten sky, the swirl of a mystic's robe, a girl's glance, fleeting as incense. It lies, of course, but Hugo lets it. Why else would he love it? The 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 grinds on around him. Pickpockets barter. A cripple mutters her litany, a beaten child's wail cuts the gloom. But Hugo is apart, a man who has slipped his leash. His breath comes soft, each plume of smoke a stitch undone, until the pipe falls from his fingers and rolls into the mire, unheeded. A lover more faithful than any he's tumbled, and for this hour, Hugo de 𝗟𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, once a lord, now a blade, always a seeker, is no one at all. Just a shape dissolving into the shadow, free as only the damned can be. He falls into darkness. It feels sudden, but it is not. Light poured into his eyes, into his head, like it was splitting him open. He is stirred from the depths, the opium peeling away. His eyes fluttered open, heavy, and the world swam into focus. Dim, jagged, silent. The dense familiar reek lingered, sour and thick, but the pulse of the slum was gone. No rasp of breath, no muttered curses, no shuffle of boots on filth-strewn stone. He lay sprawled on the floor, the hornpipe cold beside him. His head throbbed, a dull hammer against his skull, and his mouth tasted of ash. How long had he drifted? Hours? Days? He pushed himself up, sinews creaking, scars stretching taut across his chest. His hands groped for his cloak, his shirt, the battered boots he'd kicked off in the haze. But they were gone. The brass box, the dagger, vanished too. Only his trousers remained, clinging to his hips, stiff with grime. He stood, barefoot and shirtless, the cold stone biting his soles, and turned a slow circle. The den was a husk. No thieves hunched over dice, no whores coaxing coin, no crippled hag in her corner. Empty. Had they fled, robbed him blind and left him to rot? Or had he, in some stupor, shed his own skin and scattered it to the winds? He couldn't tell. The silence pressed in, uncanny, a weight heavier than the din he'd known. He stepped towards the den's mouth, the air growing sharp, and crossed the threshold into the 𝗘𝗾𝗂𝗀𝗀𝗀. The alley gaped before him, its crooked walls leaning close, but no shadows moved within. The cobbles, slick with night's dew, gleamed under a sky bruising into grey, and his breath puffed white in the chill. He retched once, and vomit spewed out of his half-open mouth, catching him off guard. It splashed loudly into the gutter. He wiped his mouth and then began walking, the stones bruising his feet. His trousers flapping loose about his legs, and peered into doorways, shuttered, still. The cart stood abandoned, its wheel cracked, a rind of bread mouldering in the muck beside it. Nothing stirred. He turned a corner, the alley spilling into a wider street, and there too the world held its breath. No clatter of hooves, no hawkers' cries, no rumble of barrels rolled to market. The houses loomed, their windows blank, and the Seine's distant murmur was the only sound. Hugo's chest tightened, whatever remained of his instincts prickling. A danger, or madness. He ran a hand through his hair, fingers brushing the scar above his ear, and felt the weight of his nakedness, unarmoured. Had the city emptied in the night, purged by plague or decree? Or was this the opium's last trick? Suffocation in a dream woven too tight to break? He pressed on, past the sagging bulk of a tavern, its sign creaking faintly in a breeze he couldn't feel. The Place de Grève stretched before him, vast and desolate, the guillotine's ghost a memory in its centre, but no crowd, no blood, no echo of the mob. His feet bled now, leaving smears on the stones, and the cold gnawed at his bare shoulders, raising goose flesh. He called out, voice hoarse, 𝗟𝗾𝗂𝗶𝗽𝗺, but the words fell flat, swallowed by the stillness. He laughed, a dry bark, and wondered if he died. Down the Rue de Barague he went, the Marais unfolding in silence, its grand facades mocking him with their emptiness. A cat should have yowled, a shutter banged, a drunkard staggered, but nothing. His breath quickened, misting in the air, and he broke into a run, the slap of his feet a solitary drumbeat. Past the Hôtel des Rennes, its turrets stark against the paling sky, and still no sign. He stopped, chest heaving, and leaned against a wall, its damp chill seeping into his spine. Had the mystic's lessons betrayed him at last, the opium unmooring him from time itself? He thought of the dervish who taught him the pipe, his eyes like burning coals. It shows you what is, not what seems. Hugo had waved that nonsense away, but now? Was this Paris the truth, a void beneath the mask, or had he slipped into some purgatory of his own making, his hands clenched, nails biting his palms, and he pushed off the wall, walking again, aimless now. The scars on his body itched. Never back, only forward. And so he trudged on, the cold gnawing deeper into his bare flesh, his breath a ragged plume in the grey dawn. The streets of Paris stretched empty before him, a labyrinth of silence, until at last, beyond the curve of the Rue de Rivoli, a flicker of motion caught his eye. He froze, heart kicking against his ribs. There, in the vast hollow of the Place de la Concorde, a mass of figures gathered, a dark clot against the pale stone. People. A crowd. Relief surged. He squinted, the distance blurring their edges, and they were there. Hundreds, perhaps thousands, clustered tight, a human sea with its waves unmoving. He started towards them, barefoot soles slapping the cobbles. The crowd grew as he neared, swelling into a giant throng, their backs to him, a wall of coats and shawls and bent heads. He slowed, chest heaving, his mind still wet at the edges. Something prickled at him, a whisper he couldn't name. He stepped closer, the square opening before him, and then it hit him. The silence. No murmur rose from the mass, no shuffle of feet, no cough or cry or snatch of laughter. Nothing. The air hung dead, heavier than the den's fog, and his skin prickled. He edged nearer, close enough now to see the weave of their wool, the slump of their shoulders, and still not a sound. His feet carried him forward, drawn by the pull of the uncanny. He entered the square, the crowd's edge a mere dozen paces off, their backs a solid line, unyielding, unturning. Then, almost mercifully, a figure broke free from the crowd's edge, a woman, slight and shawled, stepping into the open as if summoned. Her face turned to him, and for a moment she was ordinary, pale, sharp-chinned, eyes catching the grey light. She began to laugh, slowly, pleasantly, a ripple of sound in the dead air, like a brook over stones. Hugo listened. The sound a thread of warmth in the cold, and his lips twitched, half ready to answer. But the laugh continued and grew, stretching beyond mirth, turning hoarse, a rasp that scraped the morning, louder now, insistent. Her head tipped back, mouth wide, and the sound sharpened, violent in the overwhelming silence. He saw it then, her teeth, glinting wet in the dim light, cracking under the force of her jaw as it chattered. A snap, sharp as a twig underfoot, and a shard flew free, blood flecking her chin. Still she laughed, louder, wilder, the noise a howl now, her jaw working as if possessed. More pieces splintering as her rows of teeth slammed together, the sound wet and brittle and wrong. Hugo's stomach lurched, his feet rooting to the stone. The duelist in him screamed to flee, but his eyes held fast to the ruin of her face. Empty, unblinking. Her howl became a chorus, a single guttural wail bursting from every throat in the crowd, a thunderclap of sound that shattered the stillness. Heads turned, slow at first, then swift, a wave of blank faces swivelling towards him. Men, women, children, eyes like pits, mouths gaping. The woman's laugh drowned in the tide as the mob surged, arms outstretched, fingers clawing, a flood of bodies lurching as one. Hugo spun and ran. Bare feet pounding the cobbles, the cold forgotten, his scars alive with the memory of injury. Behind him the wail swelled, a mindless hymn to no god of man. He'd be crushed if he fell, pulped beneath their weight. His lungs burned, legs driving him faster. The mob smashed through the square, carts splintering, a newsstand collapsing in a spray of wood and paper. He veered towards the river, the broadness of the Seine his only hope. The street narrowed as he bolted down it. The ground shook with their pursuit, the wail a relentless roar. He burst into the quay, the water gleaming ahead. In its depth a gamble he'd take, swim or sink, before he was mashed into the ground. He stopped short and looked down. The Seine, a dark vein twisting through the city's corpse. It was choked. Boats clogged its breadth, dozens upon dozens, hulls jammed tight in a snarl of wood and rope, grinding against each other like teeth in a clenched jaw. Barges, skiffs, fishing hulks, all smashed together, the river's flow smothered beneath their weight. The human tide bore down behind him, closer now, a howling wall of sound and flesh that shook the stones underfoot. He had no time. He flung himself forward. His bare feet slammed Escau's deck, slick with river's breath, the wood groaning like a gut-shot beast. He lurched, arms thrashing, the boat bucking in the snarl of wrecks clogging the river. He glanced back, bodies poured over the quay's stone rim. They crashed onto a fishing rig, its mast broken and its splintered timbers snapping like musket volleys. His pursuers fell, dozens tumbling into the water, blank faces swallowed, hands flailing. He vaulted the barge, knees cracking timber, pain a searing spike. Clawing upright, the deck bucked. Hugo leapt to a fractured skiff, and then to a rotting hulk. Fingers raking slimed wood, the mob of thousands flooded the quay, pulverizing hulls, the river a cauldron of pale arms slapping froth. Their wail bounced back at him from the quay ahead. He sprang, boat to boat, each bound a gambler's throw. A punt collapsed, splinters gashing his shin, blood swirling wet, lungs afire. He continued to leap, gaps yawning as boats sank. The mob scaled their dead, their roar insatiable. The far bank was near. His foot skidded, but he lunged, hands smacking brick, fingers gouging into the mossy gaps between the stones. He dragged himself onto the quay, gasping. Propped on elbows, he stared back. The Seine was a slaughterhouse. Boats shattered, bodies piling into a grotesque dam. The mob kept falling, hundreds upon hundreds, smashing boats to kindling before sinking, their corpses stacking tight, choking the flow. The river slowed, its far side growing shallow, a pale carpet of drowned swelling beneath the surface. Then he saw it. His pursuers weren't sinking anymore. The sheer mass of bodies had built a causeway, the water parting to shallows where the mob now waded, knee-deep, then ankle-deep. Blank faces fixed on him, arms outstretched across the choked river. His pulse hammered, instinct howling. The dam grew with each fallen body, a bridge of flesh and bone. He heard it, the wet slap of feet, the crunch of bone on wood, a guttural hum from their throats. They'd reach him, crush him. He pushed up, legs trembling, blood dripping, and staggered into the shadowed streets. The sign was a graveyard turned Ford. Knowing they'd follow, relentless as death, until the city was theirs or he was gone. Greetings, one and all. If you enjoyed that, you can support me on my Patreon, Discord, Redbubble, or with a channel membership, or simply like, comment and subscribe to catch any future DQVO videos. And as always, my thanks for watching.